Welcome to At the Counter with the Baking Pastor. I'm Laura. This is a space for slow conversations, gentle coaching, and a little room to breathe. Nothing here needs to be fixed or finished today. Today's episode is a quiet bonus conversation, something that didn't quite fit inside a season, but felt important enough to place gently here at the counter. So, wherever you are, take a breath, settle in, and pull up a chair. Today feels quieter at the counter. Not heavy, just tender. There's a cup of coffee beside me that's gone a little cold. The room is still, and I'm aware of how much people carry quietly without ever naming it. And that's what I want to talk about today. The grief that we don't always recognize as grief. When we hear the word grief, we usually think of death, funerals, loss that's visible and clearly marked. But grief is so much wider than that. Grief can actually be 40 plus different things. Grief shows up when a season ends, when a dream changes, when a relationship shifts, when health is no longer what it was, when a role we loved comes to a close, when life doesn't unfold the way we had hoped. We grieve things we loved. We grieve things we lost. And sometimes we grieve things we never got to have. So much of that grief goes unnamed. And when grief goes unnamed, it often gets carried quietly, deep inside, where it can feel confusing and heavy. I see this all the time. People say they feel tired, but it's way more than tired. They say they feel off, but can't quite explain why. They say they feel restless, irritable, numb, or disconnected, and they don't know what's wrong. Often, what's happening underneath is grief, not dramatic grief, not visible grief, but quiet grief. Grief for the life they imagined, grief for the way things used to be, grief for certainty that disappeared, grief for safety that no longer feels guaranteed. And because there's no clear event to point to, people assume they should be fine. So they push through, they minimize, they try to explain it away, they keep going. But the weight stays. What we don't name, we still carry. That unnamed grief doesn't disappear. It just becomes heavier, and it often shows up as exhaustion, anxiety, self criticism, or feeling stuck. But grief doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be acknowledged. Grief is not weakness, it is evidence that something mattered. If you were grieving, it means you loved. It means you hoped. It means you invested your heart. That's not failure. That's humanity. Sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is gently say, "This is grief," and let that be true. You don't need a tragic story to deserve gentleness. You don't need to justify your sadness. You definitely don't need to compare your loss to anyone else's. If something mattered to you, its loss matters. If a season shaped you, its ending deserves care. If a dream once lived in you, its absence deserves space. If it feels right, I want to offer a few gentle questions. You don't have to answer them. Just notice what stirs. What loss might you be carrying, even if you never called it grief? What ending, change, or disappointment still sits quietly with you? Where might you offer yourself gentleness instead of explanation? Again, you don't have to answer these, just let them rest and see what stirs. Hear this blessing, my friend. May you be kind to what you are carrying. May you honor the parts of your story that were tender, even if they were quiet. May you know that grief is not something to rush through, but something to be held with care. May you trust that nothing about your sorrow disqualifies you from joy, hope, or wholeness. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to need time. You are allowed to be human. Thank you for spending time with me today. Some of these reflections are part of a larger body of work that's been growing quietly at the counter for a while. I'm preparing a book called At the Counter that's shaped by many of these same everyday conversations about faith, loss, gentleness, and ordinary life. I'll share more when the time is right, but for now, I'm just grateful you're here. You are always welcome here at the counter.